One of the flat earthers' biggest objections to the spherical Earth is gravity. They have somehow convinced themselves that gravity is not a real thing, or that it cannot explain how things are held to the spherical Earth. These objections to gravity are just more flat Earth falsities. They take several forms, so I will discuss them one at a time and show how each one can easily be proven wrong. 1. Gravity does not exist. Okay, so I have to start here because flat earthers really say this.
One of the biggest lies believed by all people of the world for generation after generation is the one involving gravity. When I tell people that gravity doesn't exist, they look at me as if I were a madman.
It's hard to know exactly what they mean by this because it is so obviously false. When pressed, they will admit that objects are always pulled down, but they will make up all sorts of excuses about what it is that causes this that are other than gravity. I will address these individually, but for the purposes of this video, when I say gravity, I simply mean that common universal observation that things are pulled down. We can all agree that that occurs. It doesn't really matter what you call it. We will talk about the cause of gravity later, but we first need to agree that the downward pull we all experience is real. And we call that downward pull gravity. If you don't agree that things are pulled down, please see a psychiatrist as soon as possible. You are delusional. It should be easy. You can just float to one. So really, flat earthers accept that there is a downward pull, but their real problem is with the direction of the pull. Apparently, they think that there is just a universal down direction and a universal up direction, and things just want to go down. Well, that is simply not the case, and literally tons of evidence proves otherwise, as I will show. When talking about gravity on Earth, down is toward the center of mass of the Earth. I think they're getting confused with different uses of the words up and down. We tend to say up north and down south, but that has nothing to do with gravity. That is just a human convention that came out of the way we make maps. A map like this looks wrong, but there is technically nothing wrong about it. We are just used to seeing a map with north at the top. It helps us to have a consistent way to look at maps. So north is oriented at the top and south at the bottom. But that choice was arbitrary. It had nothing to do with gravity. There is no force south of the South Pole pulling on things. Nothing. Nada. South is not down in the scientific sense. Really, children understand this. Yet many adult flat earthers amazingly somehow do not understand this. The pull of gravity near the Earth is always directed toward the center of the Earth. I will talk about the tremendous evidence for this fact. Claim number 2. Gravity has never been proven, or is just a theory. This one is only slightly less ridiculous than gravity does not exist. Gravity is ridiculously easy to prove. Countless things we see every day here on Earth prove gravity, things that we tend to take for granted. Just drop an object and watch it fall. That proves the effect of gravity. In science, we prove things by making repeated observations and watching the results. When the results are so consistent that we can make accurate predictions of it with great certainty, then it is considered scientifically proven. With gravity, we can make many predictions that never fail to be correct. For example, we don't just know that things fall, we know how fast they fall. Falling objects actually accelerate faster and faster as they fall. The rate of acceleration on Earth is 32 feet per second per second. In other words, in the first second, a dropped object will accelerate from 0 to 32 feet per second. And in the second second, it will continue to accelerate by another 32 feet per second. so now it is going 64 feet per second. And this will keep going until it hits the ground or until it reaches terminal velocity, which is the fastest it can go due to its wind resistance or other frictional forces. Another prediction we can make is that an object thrown up at an angle will always form a parabola shape as it arcs back down. Any good baseball outfielder is able to catch the ball because they are very good at predicting this parabolic path. If gravity were not a consistent force, that simply would not be possible. We also know that gravity is based on mass. This is easy to show because you can pick up a baseball, but not a car. The car has more mass, that is, more matter stuck together, than the baseball. I like to picture it this way. Every molecule of the Earth pulls on every molecule of the baseball, and also on every molecule of the car. But since the car has more molecules, the overall pull is stronger. In addition to what we observe here on Earth, we can also observe gravity out in space. One of the best examples is watching the moons of Jupiter orbit the planet through a telescope. They move fast enough that you can actually see their positions change in a single night. And most significantly, we can precisely predict their positions at any point in the future because we understand how gravity controls their orbits. Check out any space simulation software like Stellarium that can show their future positions, and then go look for yourself to see just how accurate it is. This also works for asteroids and comets. Ancient peoples predicted the return of recurring comets, such as Halley's Comet, for many centuries. But they did that only by observing the patterns. Now, we can accurately calculate their paths using the laws of gravity. Even when a new comet or asteroid is discovered, after careful observation of its path for a time, we can calculate and accurately predict its future curved path around the Sun. When flat earthers say gravity has never been proven, I think they are confused because the cause of gravity is not fully understood. We certainly do understand the effects of gravity very well, as I have already explained. And we know that it is always based on mass and distance. But while we may not entirely know why it works that way, that is not the same as being unproven. You probably don't understand how a microwave works, but you know it will heat your burrito. The prevailing idea of gravity is that it is caused by a bending of the fabric of space-time itself, like a funnel-shaped fabric causing a small ball to circle the heavy ball in the center, as in this demonstration. Objects with mass are drawn to each other due to this bending. This is a problem physicists are still working on, but the cause of gravitational effects is irrelevant. It need not be fully understood to be scientifically observed, tested, and proven. Number 3, gravity is just density and buoyancy. This one just shows how confused flat earthers can be. The way they use the term density is not correct. Density refers to an object's mass compared to its volume. A ping pong ball and a golf ball, for example, are about the same size, but the golf ball weighs more because it has more molecules. We say it is more dense. It has more molecules of matter in the same amount of space. A ping pong ball is filled with air, so the molecules are spread out more with more space between, so it is less dense. Density is a factor in how objects interact with each other, but alone it does not cause the effects of objects falling to Earth. It cannot cause it. There is no way the density alone can convey action in a particular direction. How does a ball know which way is down? Of course it doesn't. It moves down because of the consistent downward pull of Earth's gravity. Flat earthers will say that objects fall only because they are more dense than air. But we can easily show that is not true, because objects in vacuum chambers with all the air removed still drop to the bottom. In fact, if you put a golf ball and a ping pong ball in a vacuum chamber where there is no air resistance, they fall at the same rate. Same thing goes for a bowling ball and a feather, as demonstrated here. This is due to the fact that the only factor that actually causes objects to fall is Earth's gravity itself. An object's density, shape, or weight has no effect on how fast it falls in a vacuum. All objects fall at the same rate when an air resistance is not present. This is conclusive evidence of the consistent, measurable force we call gravity. Buoyancy is also misunderstood by flat earthers. They actually have this exactly backwards. Buoyancy is a direct result of gravity, not a defiance of gravity. A helium balloon goes up because helium is a very light gas. It has less density than the air around it. So gravity pulls down on the air a little stronger than it does on the helium balloon, and this forces the balloon up. The same goes for a cork in water. The water is more dense, so it is pulled down around the cork, which forces the cork up. And again, the direction of the buoyant action is always up and down, never sideways or any other direction. Gravity deniers have no explanation for the consistent direction. Here is a very simple experiment. Put a ball and a cork in a filled water bottle. The ball drops to the bottom and the cork floats to the top. Now, turn the bottle over and they will switch positions. No matter how you turn the bottle, the cork will seek the highest point and the ball the lowest point. Everything in the bottle is being pulled down by the external force of gravity. The ball is the most dense, so it has no problem pushing the water out of the way. The cork is the least dense, so it cannot push the water out of the way. The weight of the water being pulled down by gravity forces the lighter cork up. Density and buoyancy alone do not explain these effects, as flat earthers try to claim. Only the consistent downward force of gravity can explain this. Number 4. Gravity is just air pressure.
And that's the same with the air. We are here on the ground, quite low to the ground, and the air pressure on us is quite extensive. It's quite a force that we all know. And maybe the higher up you get, the less pressure the actual air is putting on you. Same principle as this. You don't need to have the Earth being a certain mass and creating a force which pulls you down to the ground, because the pressure of the air at this level is already pushing us down.
This one is really funny because air pressure is caused by gravity. Flat earthers who say this are simultaneously accepting gravity and denying it. What do they think causes air pressure? Air pressure is nothing more than the force of gravity pulling down on air molecules. This is very plain to see, as the air pressure decreases with altitude. Air molecules rest on each other, all the way up to the edge of the atmosphere. The pressure is greatest at the surface because of all the air above pushing down on the air below. The amount of air above gets less and less as you ascend. This effect is so consistent that an altimeter gauges altitude simply by measuring air pressure. Again, this only works because of the consistent downward force on everything. The same goes for water. Water pressure increases with depth. As the deeper you go, the more water there is above weighing down. Rather than a substitute for gravity, air pressure is another conclusive proof of gravity. Number 5. Gravity is just electromagnetism. This is trivial to debunk. Electromagnetism only works on ferrous metals. Gravity works on everything with mass. Try picking up a cat with an electromagnet, and then try to tell me it can be the cause of the gravitational effects we see everywhere. Number 6. Gravity is selective. Flat earthers sometimes ask, how can gravity hold the oceans but allow butterflies to fly? Or, why aren't we crushed if gravity is so strong that it can hold the oceans? Well, this is based on another misconception. They seem to think it is hard to hold heavy things down to the earth. No, that is backwards. It is easier to hold heavier things than light things. Heavy things like water react more strongly to gravity than light things. Like I said before, that is why you can easily pick up a baseball, but not a car. The car has more mass, so it reacts more to gravity, not less. Oceans are very heavy, so they are pulled very strongly to the earth, while a butterfly is very light, so it can easily fly by flapping its wings to create lift, counteracting gravity. Flat earthers seem to think that there is some force trying to pull the oceans off the earth. But there isn't. What force do they think that is? Do they think there is a pole south of the earth? No, there isn't. Why would there be? What would be the cause of that? They simply have taken for granted their whole lives that things are pulled down, but cannot wrap their heads around the fact that the down they experience is always toward the center of the earth, not some mysterious universal down that has no explanation. They also think that the spinning or other movements of the earth must be trying to fling the oceans off. This is also wrong. The earth only spins once per day, so the centrifugal force caused by that is very weak. In fact, it is only about 0.3% as strong as Earth's gravity. So gravity easily overcomes that force, and we don't feel it. But we can actually measure it. Objects actually weigh about 0.3% less at the equator than they do at the poles, due to the weak centrifugal force. The Earth's other movements also will not try to pull the oceans off the Earth. The Earth's orbit around the Sun, and the solar system's movement around the Milky Way galaxy, and the galaxy's movement in relation to other galaxies are all constant, steady movements. There is no acceleration that would cause any problem for the oceans staying stuck to the Earth. Just as you can hold a glass of water in a constantly moving vehicle without spilling it. Everything, including the water, is moving together at the same speed. But speed up, slow down, or turn the vehicle suddenly, and the water will slosh out of the glass. These are all forms of acceleration. The Earth never experiences acceleration, just constant movement. So no ocean sloshing occurs, and gravity has no problem holding the oceans to the Earth. Number 7. Water finds its level.
Water does not bend. Water always remains leveled. No matter what you do, no matter how far you go, if you put water in any type of container, that water is always going to be leveled.
Yes, water does find its level. But flat earthers are confused about the meaning of the word level. They seem to think it means straight or flat. But in this context, level means perpendicular to the force of gravity, not flat. Over the short distances we can typically see, the surface of water will appear to be flat, but it is not. It curves with the surface of the Earth. The Earth is really, really big, so the curvature is very subtle. It takes 69 miles to curve just 1 degree. So the curvature of water is just not easy to see from the surface, or even high above the surface. But as I have pointed out in other videos, the Earth's curvature has been measured for centuries using geodesic surveying techniques. And experiments over water, when done properly, clearly show that the water curves with the curve of the Earth. Flat earthers sometimes say gravity cannot bend water. But that is absurd. Of course it can. What do they think bends water at the crest of a waterfall or at the top of a fountain? Of course, it is gravity. Water reacts to forces. This is plain to see. It will always flow to the lowest point it can. When squirted up, water will always curve back down to Earth. These effects are obviously caused by gravity. What else would cause it? It is gravity that causes water to find its level, but that level is perpendicular to the force of gravity. Do flat earthers think that water somehow knows how to find a level? No, it is pulled to a level state by gravity. And since the direction of gravity is toward the center of the Earth, water naturally curves with the Earth. A bubble level works on this principle. Gravity pulls the liquid down, forcing the bubble up to the highest point, allowing it to indicate when it is perpendicular to the force of gravity. How do they think it works? It boggles the mind. They also sometimes say that rivers would have to flow uphill. Once again, they are misusing or misunderstanding a word. This is called the equivocation fallacy. Uphill means up away from gravity. Rivers never have to flow uphill in relation to gravity. They flow from points farther away from the center of the Earth to points closer to the center of the Earth, because that is where the direction of gravity is. Going around the curve of the Earth is not the same as going uphill. In conclusion, I have shown that all the flat Earth claims about gravity are wrong. They misunderstand or intentionally misconstrue some very simple concepts. They deny or are ignorant of the tremendous evidence for the consistent effects of gravity. Centuries before man ventured into space, scientists figured out how gravity explains the movements of heavenly bodies, just as it explains the effects of objects here on Earth, and how it can easily explain how we can live on the spherical Earth without falling off. Since the time of Newton, we can very accurately predict these effects. Newton's laws of motion have been consistently proven by observation and experiment. And the Cavendish experiment proves that all objects with mass pull on all other objects with mass. Flat earthers who deny gravity have to deny hundreds of years of conclusive scientific observation and experiment. Flat Earth Falsities. Plain nonsense. Flat earthers have lots of questions about how airplanes can work on a spinning, spherical Earth that they seem to think cannot be answered. Well, of course, these questions are based on misconceptions and are easy to answer when you understand some simple scientific principles and the physical forces involved. Here are just a few of the most common questions. Number 1. Why does it take the same time to fly east as it does west if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour? Well, there are two reasons that this is not a problem at all. Firstly, airplanes fly through air. They require air to generate thrust with propellers or jets to move forward, and to generate lift to stay aloft. And all the atmosphere of the Earth rotates with the Earth due to gravity and friction. Earth's atmosphere is held to the Earth by gravity. This is evidenced by many things, but most notably by the fact that the higher you go, the weaker the atmospheric pressure is. Atmospheric pressure is just the weight of the air above pushing down on the air below. If the air was just contained in a dome or firmament, as many flat earthers claim, rather than being held by gravity, then there would be no reason for air pressure to decrease with altitude. And that pressure causes friction against the surface of the Earth, and also air molecules have friction against each other. If you don't believe that, hold your arm out of the window of a fast-moving vehicle. The force you feel is the result of air friction. The laws of physics cause the atmosphere to rotate with the Earth. It would actually take some unknown force to counteract the friction to prevent the atmosphere from revolving with the Earth. So a plane flying east has to fly through about the same amount of air as a plane flying west, plus or minus wind currents, regardless of the Earth's rotation. Another fact that flat earthers are ignoring, or are ignorant of, is the law of conservation of momentum. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. So a plane sitting on the ground is already moving with the Earth. It does not instantly lose that momentum when it takes off. It continues moving with the Earth. and must use thrust to add or to subtract from that movement. This is really simple to test. Just toss up an object while you're in a constantly moving vehicle. Does it slam into the back of the vehicle? No, it keeps moving with the vehicle and with you, and from your frame of reference comes straight back down. That is conservation of momentum. And the same goes for aircraft taking off. They keep their momentum moving with the Earth and fly through the air that is also moving with the Earth. Number 2. How can a plane land going north or south if the Earth is spinning sideways at 1,000 miles per hour? The answer to this is the same as for the first question. The airplane, the air, and the Earth are all moving east together, so this poses no problem for landing north or south. A strong crosswind does make landing very difficult, but the Earth's rotation does not cause crosswind. Wind is generally caused by temperature gradients. Hot air rises, so colder air must move in to fill the gap caused by the rising air, causing a vertical circulation pattern that we feel as wind. A similar flat earther question involves a hypothetical helicopter going straight up and waiting for the Earth to rotate beneath it, rather than the helicopter needing to fly west.
I want to see a helicopter like this lifting off from in Australia upside down while the Earth is spinning. I want to see the Earth spinning 1,000 miles an hour while a helicopter takes off and flies around like you tell us it does. It just seems very absolutely ridiculous to me, and you'd have to be really brainwashed to believe something like that, like.
Hopefully you can see now why this is impossible. The helicopter is hovering in air that is moving with the Earth, and the helicopter's momentum prevents it from remaining stationary independent of the Earth's rotation. Number 3. Why doesn't a plane have to constantly dip its nose to follow the curve of the Earth?
40,000 feet going horizontal, because in my reality, a straight line is a straight line, right? I don't know about other people's realities, where a straight line is supposedly curved. But in my reality, the plane gains altitude as it gets further and further away. I mean, not before long. This plane should be in space.
The short answer to this is gravity. Planes fly by generating lift with their wings to overcome the force of gravity. When flying level, the force of lift equals the force of gravity on the plane, and therefore the plane stays at a constant altitude. To fly to a higher altitude, that is, up farther away from gravity, you don't just tip the nose up, you also have to apply extra thrust to accelerate and increase the lift. Since the source of gravity is toward the center of the Earth, without extra lift, the plane stays parallel to the curved surface of the Earth, which is measured from mean sea level, disregarding the terrain. So when flying straight and level, gravity keeps the plane in a curved path around the Earth automatically, without any need to dip the nose or to perform any other maneuvers. What pilots call straight and level flight is straight in terms of left and right, but curved vertically with the curve of the Earth. Level means exactly that in this context, parallel to the direction of the force of gravity, which is curved. They do not have to dip the nose to keep the plane level to the surface. Gravity does it automatically for them, when they maintain the proper speed and keep the plane pointed straight ahead. Number 4. Why did a plane flying from Taiwan to Los Angeles make an emergency landing in Alaska? This claim dates back to 2015, when a pregnant woman went into labor partway through the long flight across the Pacific and actually gave birth before they could land. Flat earthers claim that the emergency landing in Alaska only makes sense on a flat Earth and not on a globe Earth. Once again, they are flat wrong. Their main error is that they use the wrong kind of map to make their case. A rectangular map of the Earth, such as this, flattens out the Earth's 3D curvature to represent the Earth in a two-dimensional way. When you do this, it will always distort the actual distances and orientations of landmasses on the Earth. The only truly accurate depiction of the Earth is a globe, or a three-dimensional representation of a globe, such as Google Earth. So let's look at the actual intended flight path of this particular flight on Google Earth. Notice how far north the path actually is. The article states that the emergency situation started about 6 hours into the flight, which puts the plane about here. You can easily see that the nearest populated area to land the plane from that point is indeed Alaska, and it is about 1,900 miles closer than Los Angeles from the point of the emergency. When the intended flight path is depicted on a 2D map, such as a flight tracker map, or the 2D mode of Google Earth, the flight path is curved to account for the Earth's curvature, which has been flattened out in this type of map. Again, this shows that Alaska is a logical emergency landing site for this flight. It is far out of the way, certainly, but less so than any other populated locations. So this flat Earth argument doesn't fly. Number 5. Why do all intercontinental flights in the southern hemisphere make fueling stops in the northern hemisphere?
Map these out, and look, it just looks ridiculous what you have to try and do. You can't just go straight across. You have to actually get up into the northern hemisphere and then come back down. So that doesn't make any sense. So I mapped it on the flat Earth map. And whoa, okay, now it makes sense.
This is very similar to the emergency landing claim and has some of the same problems. Notice how they always show the flights on a rectangular projection map rather than using a correct 3D map. But also, they are cherry-picking multi-stop flights when direct flights do exist across the southern continents, like this regularly scheduled flight from Sydney, Australia to Santiago, Chile, Qantas 27. Not only does this flight path make perfect sense on a globe, it is actually impossible on a flat Earth. The flight path from FlightAware or any other flight tracker shows that the flight curves down towards Antarctica and back up. Shown on Google Earth, you can clearly see why this works, and why it is the most direct path. On a flat Earth, the most direct path would take the plane over North America, but that is not what Qantas or any flight trackers show, or what anyone has reported. And if you map the actual path on a flat Earth, you would actually have to circumnavigate about half the Earth, and it would take about 3 times longer, and it would actually be well beyond the maximum distance range of any commercial jetliners. And there are several other direct flights across the southern hemisphere continents that flat earthers just ignore or discount, such as from Johannesburg to Perth. But getting back to the supposed northern hemisphere fuel stops claimed by flat earthers, this is easily explained. These are not fuel stops, but simply multi-destination routes. It is not economically or feasibly possible for airlines to offer flights from every major city to every other major city, and most especially for very distant cities. So often, long routes are necessarily comprised of multiple shorter routes, even if they have to go far out of the way. For example, I searched for a flight from Sydney, Australia to Santa Cruz, Bolivia. My cheapest results involved 3 stops in Honolulu, Los Angeles, and Panama. This trip will take a whopping 38 hours and take you thousands of miles out of the way. But this is because there are simply not enough passengers that want to go from Sydney to Bolivia to support a regular direct route. Flat earthers cherry-pick cases like this to make their case, and often they assert that the extra stops are fueling stops. No, Each leg of the flight will have different passengers, and you will usually have to change planes at each stop, or even change airlines. These are not fuel stops. They are separate flights combined to make long trips economically feasible. And of course, again, they ignore the direct intercontinental flights that do exist in the Southern Hemisphere, like Qantas 27. Some flat earthers even say that that flight is a fake flight. Apparently Qantas, and FlightAware, and Expedia, and all other flight trackers are part of the enormous Globe Earth conspiracy, because reasons. The confirmation bias of some flat earthers knows no bounds. Whatever evidence disagrees with their belief is automatically rejected as fake. That is no way to honestly investigate anything. Number 6. How can gyroscopic artificial horizons work if the plane is curving around the Earth? Why don't they roll backwards?
Now, an aircraft has an artificial horizon, and it's based on gyroscope. So before they take off, they calibrate the artificial horizon. They just spin it up so that it's level, and then they take off. So if they take off with a gyroscope calibrated, and they start going over the curve of the Earth,
Right.
the gyroscope will stay upright. So the artificial horizon will start to roll backwards.
Right.
But it doesn't. It just stays nice and flat and level. That right there is proof that the planes fly over a plane.
In case you don't know, an artificial horizon is an instrument used by pilots to indicate the position of Earth's actual horizon relative to the orientation of the plane. They are especially useful at night, or in other low visibility conditions, to help the pilot know the plane's attitude, not to be confused with altitude. Attitude is simply the orientation of the plane with respect to the surface of the Earth and the horizon. If the plane is banked left or right, called roll, or if the nose is pointed up or down, called pitch, the artificial horizon will indicate that in an intuitive display. Artificial horizons are also called attitude indicators. It is true that the artificial horizon uses a gyroscope to help it maintain a consistent reference to the real horizon, despite the forces acting on the plane while maneuvering. But flat earthers claim that the artificial horizon gyroscope is fixed in space, and therefore it should roll backwards as the plane flies around the curve of the Earth. But this is not true. Once again, they are missing or intentionally rejecting one key fact. Artificial horizons have a mechanism which constantly adjusts to the direction of the Earth. This accounts for the fact that gyroscopes always are subject to forces of acceleration, which can cause them to tilt out of alignment, called precession. They tend to be fixed in space, but not with perfect accuracy, so adjustments are needed. And these automatic adjustments will also easily account for the Earth's curvature as well. And they do this using Earth's gravity. Air-driven artificial horizons do this through the use of a mechanism called pendulous vanes that react to the force of gravity to keep the device adjusted to level. Here you can see the inside of a device of this type. Notice how these arms move with gravity when the internal structure is turned. These are the pendulous vanes, and they open or restrict 4 airflow ports that drive the gyroscope in such a way that it causes it to realign to the Earth's gravity. Electronic versions do this using mercury switches that react to gravity, and they control torque motors that adjust the gyroscope. Here is an excellent demonstration of this in a modern electronic artificial horizon by YouTuber Wolfie6020. After intentionally forcing the device out of alignment, you can watch as it automatically adjusts itself back to level over several minutes. Wolfie6020 has a number of excellent videos on the operation of the artificial horizon. I linked some in the description, and he shows them automatically adjusting in both real time and sped up, as seen here. The device corrects far faster than is needed to correct for the curvature of the Earth, even for the fastest jet aircraft. So once again, flat earthers are ignoring facts that invalidate their claim. All of these questions are based on misunderstandings of how planes work, ignorance of physics, or denial of key facts. When you get all the facts right and understand the physics involved, the globe Earth works perfectly fine, and airplanes have no problem flying over and around its surface. Another common flat Earth claim is that so-called hotspots prove the sun is very close, rather than the evidence-based scientific conclusion that it is 93 million miles away. This claim was popularized by Eric Dubay in his video called 200 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball.
124. Amateur balloon footage taken above the clouds has provided stunning visual proof that the sun cannot be millions of miles away. In several shots, you can see a clear hotspot reflecting on the clouds directly below the sun's spotlight-like influence. If the sun were actually millions of miles away, such a small, localized hotspot could not occur.
The hotspot he shows, and the one most often shown, is from this dog cam high-altitude balloon footage. As a quick side note, despite what flat earthers will try to say, this video clearly does show the curvature of the Earth, and it is not due to lens distortion, as expertly demonstrated in a video by Flow Plus. There are two cameras on the balloon. One has a wide-angle lens, and you can tell this because when the horizon moves to the bottom of the field of view, it actually appears to be concave. And then it appears to bend back up to convex when near the top of the frame. This is typical of lens distortion from a wide-angle lens. But the other camera does not have a wide-angle lens, which you can clearly tell because the horizon does not bend up and down. So the curvature you can clearly see on this camera is not due to lens distortion. And furthermore, Flow Plus uses an ingenious technique to further demonstrate the curve. By compressing the image laterally, with a straight line added as a reference. The line remains straight, but the curve gets even more pronounced, clearly showing the curve is real. But back to the hotspot seen in the video. Flat earthers claim that this hotspot could not occur if the sun were so far away, and it must be really close. But is this true? No, not at all. First of all, while it appears this hotspot is on the clouds, it is actually reflecting off water below the clouds. The balloon was launched from Wasbeck, Germany, and the Baltic Sea to the east is clearly seen in other parts of the video. There is a break in the thickest clouds at this line, revealing the reflective sea below. Water can act like a mirror and reflect an image of the sun directly to the viewer. That is all a hotspot is. A direct reflection of the disk of the sun. There are many photos of the sun reflecting off of water that creates a similar effect, like these. Do you think the sun is hovering directly over this spot on the water? Or over this one? Or over this one? No, of course not. The water is just reflecting an image of the distant sun in the background. Hotspots do not usually occur on clouds because they tend to scatter the light diffusely in all directions, rather than reflect it like water can. In fact, I looked for other hotspots on clouds and really could not find any. This dog cam image looks like it's on clouds, but it's not. It's on water. But you can find lots of photos from above the clouds with a bright sun, but there is no hotspot. If the sun were really close, and it ever causes a hotspot on clouds, then why doesn't it always cause a hotspot on everything, all the time? This is just another example of flat earthers cherry-picking data that seems to support their belief. Here is a video taken from a plane of a series of hotspots reflecting off the water below. Notice how the reflection moves along with the viewer in the plane. This proves it is not caused by a close sun shining on one small spot, but it is a reflection of the sun far in the distant background. unless you think the sun is chasing the plane. When traveling in a plane or a car or a train in a straight line, have you noticed how things close to you seem to zip by, while farther things like distant mountains seem to hardly move at all? This is called parallax. The sun is so far away that it will stay completely stationary in your view when moving in a straight line, which creates the illusion that it is following you. That is why these reflections of the sun in the water seem to follow the plane. If the sun were as close as flat earthers claim it is, this would not happen. Parallax is just one of the many ways we know the sun is millions of miles away. And other surfaces can reflect hot spots as well. Look at this photo I took of a car. Oh my God, the sun is about to crash into this car. Oh no, look out! The sun is hovering right next to this building. No, of course that is absurd. It's just a reflection of the visible disk of the sun caused by the reflective surfaces. The same goes for all hotspots. Now, look again at the dog cam image and realize that the sun is not directly over that spot. That's absurd. But it is millions of miles behind it, reflecting its image off the water to the camera. It in no way indicates the sun must be very close. Here is another related claim by Eric Dubay, which is often repeated by flat earthers.
127. The fact that the sun and moon's reflections on water always form a straight line path from the horizon to the observer proves the Earth is not a ball. If the Earth's surface was curved, it would be impossible for the reflected light to curve over the ball from horizon to observer.
This is another silly argument. When water is still, it tends to reflect like a mirror, as I have shown. This is also called specular reflection. But the ocean is rarely still, and usually has millions of tiny ripples across its surface. These ripples will reflect the sunlight in all directions. This is called diffuse reflection. But the most direct path of the reflecting sunlight off these ripples will tend to form a line across the surface of the water, directly in line with the sun from the viewer's perspective. Because these are tiny individual reflections, the subtle curvature of the Earth will have no discernible effect on them. Think about it. Each tiny ripple is in clear view of the sun above the horizon, and as the water moves, it bounces the light in all directions. From the viewer's perspective, this results in a line of brightly lit water, as the most direct light rays from the sun shine down to the water and reflect back up to the viewer's eyes. Remember, the surface of the Earth only curves 1 degree every 69 miles, so there is no reason to expect that the curvature would have a visible impact on the line of solar reflections visible to the viewer. It is way too subtle to see. The flat Earth argument here really makes no sense. They simply don't understand how light reflection works.